We as a community have been doing a lot of great work bringing mindfulness into organizations, but I think that there are some audiences that are being left behind. And what I want to do is kind of introduce those audiences and talk about how we can be a greater service in some places of organizations where that potential does still exist. Okay. Of course, it exists in many places, but I think these are quite important to talk about. So, how many people have seen this picture before in a magazine? Right? Cross-legged, sitting on a conference table. Why do they always have people sit on tables? I don't know. And, there's a similar image like this for mindfulness in general, where a young, usually white woman is sitting where? At the beach, right? And that's what general mindfulness is. I guess this is the workplace version of sitting at the beach, sitting in a conference room. But if you look at this image, there's a lot also that goes into this, because this communicates how we think about mindfulness at work. It's basically someone in an office job, right? A white-collar person dressed nicely in a conference room or in a meeting, taking a moment out to gather themselves to practice mindfulness, right? And if you look at some of the pioneering organizations that have brought mindfulness into this context, into the workplace, here's a representative list of some of the early adopters. Okay, what do we have here? We have tech companies, pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies. There are some others, there's Patagonia, there's General Mills, but many of the originators, many of the companies that first brought mindfulness into the workplace were basically professional, white-collar based organizations, right? And this, I think, has shaped the way that we think about mindfulness in organizations. And if you think about where has the attention focused even within this audience, what types of jobs, what types of roles have we thought about bringing mindfulness to? And there's a clue in the name of this organization and the name of this conference. Mindful? Yes. Mindful leaders, mindful leadership. That's where the focus has been for our community. And you know what? That's a really smart place to focus. And that's also represented by the bookshelf that you can find, right? In terms of what's been published about, where mindfulness might be relevant in organizations. This makes a lot of sense, because if you can influence one leader to bring mindfulness into their organization, the idea is they could have an impact on the entire organization. It's kind of like the trickle-down theory of mindfulness in organizations, right? And it's served us very well as a community, and it's worked for organizations. But what I would say is that, what I would propose is that the trickle-down approach to mindfulness doesn't trickle down to everyone, that some populations are being left out. Right? Who's being left out? Well, what I'd like to explore is two populations that I think so far haven't really reaped the benefits of mindfulness. The first one is manufacturing workers, people who build the stuff that we use, okay? There's not as many people in these jobs anymore as there used to be, but 12 million is a lot of people. And this includes also people in distribution, people who work in those Amazon warehouses that pick our stuff seemingly day and night somewhere around the corner so that we get it the next morning. This is an audience that I don't think has received the benefits of mindfulness in the workplace. Another one is call center workers, okay? And I've had some experience with both of these groups. Call center workers during my time at Aetna, where I was chief mindfulness officer for a number of years. One of the first things I did is I visited all the different divisions of the company. And I had a chance to sit with call center folks, to learn about their jobs, to do side-by-sides and see what it's like to handle a call. And it's pretty amazing. I mean, they're juggling really multiple screens, multiple platforms, trying to find the information, trying to confirm it, and trying to give you the information that you need, okay? It's an amazing job. And that's actually the group that I want to talk about first. in terms of how mindfulness, number one, I want to look at what the stressors are in these jobs, what's the kind of state of wellness in these jobs, and whether mindfulness can serve them, okay? So starting with call center workers, what's a call center job like? Well, if you ever had one of those days where you're on back-to-back phone calls, and some of the phone calls you're wondering whether you should be on or not, other phone calls, some people are arguing with you, other phone calls, you're just getting some quiet resistance, you know, just like one after the other after the other. How do you feel at the end of one of those days when it's been back-to-back phone calls? Exhausted. Now, what if that was your day every day? What was that? What if you did that every day, day in and day out? That was your entire job. How would you feel? Okay, that's what this job is like. The physical challenges, sedentary. Can't get up. You can get up and stretch for a minute, but that's about it. You can't go out and walk your dog and take in nature or do any of those things during the day. High work demands, a lot of pressure, first call resolution to come to an answer for that client's need right away, so they don't need to call back. Okay, and then of course a lot of quality measures and handling time measures are also there. Okay, and tight scheduling. You really don't have any time for yourself except for those officially scheduled breaks when you might need to call home to talk to your child care provider or make some other calls to take, to have something to do with your other life. So, not a lot of time available. Emotionally also, these jobs are very difficult due to something that we call emotional labor. What this is when you feel something inside, a certain emotion internally, but you have to express a different emotion when you talk to the people that are in front of you. We've all had this experience. So you could really be like kind of zoned out and not really be so interested in this particular customer's priority, but you have to act kind and attentive and present, okay? On a good day, you may be all those things, but you can't be those things 8 hours a day. Other times, you may have someone who you talk to who is not particularly nice to you, who may blame you for all of their problems. You still have to be nice to them, okay? And that's when it gets difficult, because there's something called surface acting, when you have to act like an emotion that you don't experience. And then there's something that's called emotional dissonance, when you're really feeling angry at someone who's cursing you out for no reason, and you still have to act kind and patient. And that takes a lot out of you, right? That's exactly what can lead to burnout. So this is what a call center job is like. What's the state of well-being in these jobs? Well, there was one study done by Cornell for the Communications Workers of America, a union, 2,000 employees. What they found is that 68% of call center workers that they surveyed felt that they were regularly under stressful or highly stressful conditions. 50% were emotionally drained daily, and 24% were taking stress and anxiety medication on a regular basis. 50% had taken it at some point, 24% were taking it actively. And I actually saw that number in a separate study as well, that exact same number. So, do you think mindfulness might be helpful for this audience? It might be, right? Excuse me. Well, let's see what the research says about what mindfulness can do for these folks. So I looked through the research. I'm kind of a research geek. And how many mindfulness studies are published every year? About 800 these days, 1,000. Guess how many studies I found on this population? One study on implementing mindfulness for these organizations. There are some correlational studies out there as well, but one that looks at when we train people in these jobs, what's the outcome? The good news is that it was a nice study, okay? It was a 5-week program, 10 minutes of practice in the morning, 5 minutes after lunch, and it had great benefits. You can see the benefits here, reductions in stress, anxiety, depression, and negative affect, and also actually a small but significant increase in client satisfaction. okay? So this tells us that mindfulness can help people in these jobs, as we might guess, okay? So let's talk about the other audience now, manufacturing workers, and see how they're doing. Manufacturing jobs, of course, are physically demanding. Things have to happen quickly, high speed. A lot of concern for safety, which is of course good, but it takes a lot of attention and effort, and you have to do things right, okay? A lot of concern about quality and reducing errors, which is also can be quite stressful. Competing demands between quantity and quality, between safety and output. And then finally, shift work, which is actually pretty difficult to deal with if you're on the second or the third shift when you're working into the evening or even overnight, okay? And in terms of the wellness picture for these folks, there was a study that compared blue-collar and white-collar workers in a town, and what they found in a geographic area, what they found is that on average, blue-collar workers experienced 20% more stress than white-collar workers. They had higher rates of depression, less likely to seek help if they do have depression. And there's reasons for this, because they can't take off the morning to go see a doctor, right? It just doesn't work that way in this world, okay? High rates of physical exhaustion, sleep problems, and also unhealthy habits or manifestations of stress in the form of habits in terms of smoking, obesity, and also higher incidence of chronic disease. So does this sound like a place where we might want to bring mindfulness? I think so. So here we go again. How many studies do you think were done for this audience? Well, in 2017, CDC found 0. And as you can see here, the message from the CDC is that this audience really needs some attention in terms of bringing mindfulness to them, because they're experiencing higher stress and less care, less practice of mindfulness. And there's a couple of other things that came out of the study, which they also found that overall, blue-collar workers are one-third as likely to practice mindfulness as white-collar workers. And even controlling for things like socioeconomic class, socioeconomic status, educational status, blue-collar workers are still less likely to practice mindfulness than white-collar workers. And we know from other places that white-collar work, or richer and whiter people tend to be more likely to practice mindfulness overall. And that's kind of a reflection that we see here. For some reason, these practices are not resonating as readily with this audience, okay? And as it says here, given the low prevalence of these practices noted in this study, there's a pressing need for the development of interventions targeting these occupational groups. I mean, I didn't even write this, I just found this. It was amazing. So, at that time, 2017, 0 studies on implementing mindfulness in manufacturing. Since then, there has been 1. Isn't that great? Yeah, we're making progress. And once again, 10 classes, okay, 2 hours each class. This is not something that would be implemented, but it's a nice research study. And again, what we see is that mindfulness can be very helpful for this audience if it's implemented, okay? So where does this leave us, okay? It leaves us with what looks like a challenge. And again, I want to emphasize, this is no one's idea of the right thing to be happening. There are reasons why mindfulness is not being implemented in these places, because it's not easy, okay? And here are some of the challenges to implementation that we have with these groups. There's limited time to teach, okay? In other words, you can't offer 1 hour a week sessions and expect people to show up. It's not going to be conducive with their jobs, okay? So we have to, if something's going to be taught, it has to be taught in a very short period of time. There's also limited time to practice for the same reasons. If someone's going to do 10 or 15 minutes of mindfulness practice at work, it's going to take up their entire break or a significant part of their lunch hour. Difficult environment to practice, okay? There's generally not meditation rooms around. There are in some places. It's hard to find a quiet environment where you can maybe close your eyes and even listen to an app for 10 minutes. Less acceptance of mindfulness practice. That's something that I believe is there. I don't know if there's a lot of solid evidence about it, but I think that could be true. Limited access to the company intranet. If you work in a manufacturing environment or a call center, you're not looking at what's new on the company website in your spare time between meetings. Okay, it's just not on the radar screen. Besides that, in manufacturing environments, people don't even have many times company emails. So they're not going to get an email blast that you think is reaching everybody in a company. They don't get that stuff. And finally, anecdotally, I didn't find any hard data on this, but it seems to me that there is less investment per capita, per head, in the well-being of people in these jobs. Does that sound reasonable? Yeah, it does. It does. So how can we bring mindfulness to these audiences in a way that overcomes all of these challenges? What we faced is a potential project when a manufacturing client brought us in and said, we want to reduce the stress of our manufacturing employees. It's something that's showing up. How do we do it? So the first thing we thought is, well, we'll give them our best program. We'll give them everything we got, 5-week course, 1 hour a week, drop-in sessions, identify mindfulness champions, all the things that we know are best practices. And then we went and we did some focus groups there. And we said, it's not going to work. There's no way this is going to work. So we had to come up with a new way to do this. And what we came up with is something that we'll call breathwork. Okay? So breathwork is kind of an umbrella group of practices that have to do with regulating how you breathe, both as an exercise and a habit, in such a way that it will significantly reduce your stress and enhance your well-being. Okay? If there's yoga practitioners here, you're probably familiar with pranayama practices, right? And that's actually what we used as the basis for what we offered. There are other practices that have been developed more in more recent times, and also others that that have different lineages and different backgrounds. But that's what we're talking about, breathing practices. So why did we think this was a good idea? Well, number one, because they're supported by research, okay? Breathing practices, breathwork has been shown to be effective to reduce stress and enhance well-being. Number two, they're simple to teach. You don't have to talk about concepts like acceptance and kindness. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I make a living doing that. But what you can actually do is talk about physically how to breathe in and out in a way that will down-regulate your physiology, right? It can be practiced anywhere, anytime. We've heard it so many times here, as an anecdotal thing. When you feel stressed, take a couple of breaths. A lot of times, even in the workplace, in our white-collar office environment, a mindful moment or a mindful pause might begin with a couple of deep breaths in and out, right? It's physically engaging, okay? So it's something that people can actually do. And of course, one of the beautiful things about mindfulness is we teach people that you don't have to do anything, that not doing is really a very powerful practice. But this is another alternative where you can say, yeah, this is something that you can do. And it resonates, it's easier for people to understand. And then finally, it's more readily acceptable because it's pretty easy to explain that breathing is important to your health and your well-being. And I'm going to teach you how to do it in a way that is going to improve how you feel physically and emotionally. So that's why we decided to put together a breathwork program for some of these, for this client. Our results. First, I want to talk very briefly about breathwork, how it works. Basically, if you do breathwork exercises, these are the immediate effects. It reduces your stress immediately. It takes you out of fight or flight, activates your parasympathetic nervous system. It improves your lung functioning, so your lungs become more efficient, okay? You use less energy and you breathe more fully. This leads to greater oxygenation in the blood, also better balance of pH, and actually better balance of carbon dioxide as well, which is a really important part of actually healthy breathing, okay? And it improves your heart health because your heart and your breath are very closely connected. And if you can improve one, it will improve the other as well. And what these direct effects lead to are a lot of secondary effects. I think this list probably looks pretty familiar to us, right? This is what we often see as the outcomes of mindfulness practice. Okay, and there's been a fair amount of research done on this, but breathwork is really just now coming into its own. So how did these pilots go? How did this program go in the workplace? Well, we created a program called Stressless Breath, and these are the results that we got. First, this is what the program looked like. This version of the program actually had people take 2 hours out of their work time to attend the training. The trainings were 1 week apart, okay? But after that, there was no requirement for drop-ins. There was nothing really that happened after that, except we encourage people to continue to use what they've done. Okay, so it's a one-time time investment, okay? And I will tell you, the first time we did this, we did several pilots before we got to this one. We started with 3 sessions, and our client was like, oh, okay. And then after we ran that once, they said, do you think you could do it in 2 sessions? It'd be a lot easier to schedule because scheduling is so difficult, as I said. This was a learning that we had along the way. And what were our results? Well, I'll tell you that the first couple of times we ran this, and we kept changing it as we went. The first couple of times we ran this, we got very positive ratings on the class itself and very positive comments. But what we didn't see is differences between the pre and the post-test assessment on critical questions. So I'm running an evaluation session tomorrow, how to evaluate your program. If we're doing a basic level 1 assessment, we'd say, wow, this program is great. But if we're looking at changes in outcomes, you know, it was clear that we weren't there. So we ran it a couple more times until we came out with a version that really worked well. And these are the results that we saw. So you'll see some of these charts go up, some of them down, but just believe me, if you see a change, it's in the right direction. If you can't read these, the one that we focus on, of course, first is the one in the middle, in terms of whether people agree with the statement that I feel regularly stressed during the day. So a 10%, 11% reduction in stress. Excuse me. The other thing you'll notice is on the left, 25% increase in how people felt when they woke up in the morning. They felt, they woke up refreshed, 25% increase. And a lot of the comments we got were that it helped them to sleep a lot better. And I've seen this in other studies as well. So these were results that we were quite happy with. You know, 16% more relaxed during the day, okay? 8% better, more able to recover from stressful events, 10% less worn out after work, 11% less fatigue on the job. And you can see the asterisks here indicate the level of significance of some of these different things, okay? So we're very excited to get these results. We're seeing what we knew was possible. But we were also wondering whether this would work for the other population, call center folks, who I've been interested in, like I said, since I was at Aetna. So we found a client who was interested in running a pilot on the call center work environment. Oh, by the way, here are some comments from the folks in the manufacturing study. The bottom one on the left, when I feel stressed, I take a few minutes and do the breathing techniques and almost immediately feel more relaxed and ready to get back at it, okay? The ability to recover. And of course, they would have to get back at it no matter what, but at least they felt ready to get back at it after they did these practices. And then of course, on the right, we see the quotes about sleeping better, okay? And even when we get exhausted, when they get exhausted at work. The nice thing about breath work is you can teach exercises that can down-regulate your system, and you can also teach exercises that can increase your energy, okay, without stressing you out. And we have both of those types of exercises in our training on purpose for that reason. Let's look at the call center pilot. What we did for this one is taking clues from the last pilot. We said, what if we could do this in just one session? What if we could train people? Just how much easier would it be to roll this out if we only had to teach one session? And what we did is we designed that program, but then we also built in a 2-week habit building period after the session where we sent, these people were on email, but you can also do this on text because often texts are available, phone numbers are available for people. Sending encouraging messages, sending links to videos and to other resources. Okay, so we made it clear this is a 2-week program. This is the 1-hour kickoff, and you'll be, we encourage you to practice these exercises over the next 2 weeks. Okay, again, pre-test and post-test. Pre-test is given at the beginning of the session, and post-test is sent out 2 weeks after the session. What did we see here? 22% reduction in stress, okay? Which is what what you might see after a 5-week program, mindfulness program, perhaps, okay? One shot, 1-hour investment, 22% reduction in stress. And then also here, what's interesting is there's no effect on waking up rested, but there is a bigger effect on the focus side, where 14% of the people felt less checked out during the day. Okay, and again, this is reflected in other research that I saw, that in this world, stress reduction is number one because of the emotional labor that we talked about. The next is a benefit of increase in focus, which we didn't see that much in the manufacturing world. Okay, so this has taught us a lot about how to bring stress, how to bring mindfulness into these audiences, what we can get away with in terms of bringing things down, making them as efficient as possible when we roll them out. And in a way that doesn't just sound nice, doesn't just give us, happy people who are glad they came, but also gave us measurable results in health and well-being. And here are some of the comments that came from the call center folks. The top one in the well-being section I'll highlight. I'm able to get into a calmer headspace more quickly after a stressful situation at work. That honestly is what I was shooting for, because what we're talking about is when somebody has that really difficult conversation, they need to get themselves together somehow, get themselves rebalanced and into a positive state of mind or a neutral state of mind before that next call comes in 4 minutes, right? And these practices help them to do that, in the space of maybe just a couple of breaths. And I'm running out of time here, so I'll just move on. The learnings that we got out of this whole process. Number one, we learned that breath work is a viable approach. It's not time sensitive, it's not time intensive, it's readily accepted, and it works, okay? Number two, design programs with time in mind. Time is money in these places. So if you can deliver something in less time and show results, that will help you a great deal in terms of adoption. Make it one session if possible. Focus on teaching practices instead of concepts, and teach demonstrable micro practices. Teach them what they can do if they have 30 seconds, if they have three breaths that they can take. And number three, be prepared for what's different. When first time we went into the manufacturing space, they said, okay, we'll do this program. We'll have everybody show up for this training Monday at 9 a.m. Okay. And I said, what do you mean everybody? Don't you have to market it and get people to sign up? They said, oh no, we'll just schedule it. So think about what you're going to do when you face a situation like that. What's the implication to teaching the people that may not even know why they're there and might or might not be interested in what you have to offer? How does that change how you teach? Is that a place that you want to teach, depending on what's going on? I mean, to me, honestly, in this space, it's okay, but just you have to make your own decisions about that. Teaching large groups virtually. In a manufacturing environment, people don't have their own computers. So in COVID, I was basically on a TV in the front of the cafeteria. I could see people moving around like 30, 40 feet back. They could hear me. I couldn't really hear them. I had kind of a mediator on site, but it's like the worst possible way that you could imagine teaching, honestly. And I can only imagine what the results might have been if I could have been in person. But be ready for that. Ask yourself, how will this be delivered? At least with call center folks, people have their own computers, so they may not have their own cameras. And then finally, be prepared for people not having access to the intranet, not having access to resources that you might post somewhere, not having emails that you can use to follow up with them. Be aware of those realities, okay? So, it's been a wonderful learning experience. I think we've been able to bring these practices to an audience that can really benefit from it. And my call for you is to think about the same, okay? So, as you do your work in organizations, see what you can do to make mindfulness more inclusive of all employees, regardless of level or role. It's easy to say, come to my session. I know you guys, I'm doing a mindfulness thing. Come by for an hour. It'll be great. Doesn't work. It's a great place to start. You don't have to start with this, but make this part of your plan to say, can I meet with some operations folks and see how I can embed these things in a way that's accessible to every employee, And then the final lesson is, some of these jobs are pretty hard, And it's great to teach people how to be more resilient. But what would be even better is if we were able to take some of the stress out of these jobs, right? Maybe there could be a standard where we say, if jobs are beyond a certain level of stress, they need to be re-engineered, regardless of the role. Maybe there should be some standard where we say, jobs just shouldn't be stressful beyond a certain point, regardless of the wellness and the training that we do. Maybe that's something that we could look at as well within organizations, because teaching people to be resilient is great. Giving people jobs where they don't need every possible tool to make it through those jobs would be even better. So, if you're interested, here's some of the references that I found in doing this work that could be helpful to you. So I'll just leave this up for a second, and that's my message to you. So, thank you very much.